Welcome to the December 2025 edition of FO Exclusive. Unlike the last 11 months of the year, and we're back, we will be looking forward. We will examine the world in 2026, or rather we'll conjure up the world in 2026. Predictions are a fool's business, but both of us take after Don Quixote. We are both fools. We will tilt at the windmills. And today we are going to use a framework that might scandalize some of you. It's called SPERM. No, it does not stand for what Donald Trump or Elon Musk or Boris Johnson would imagine. SPERM stands for social, political, economic, religious, and military factors. So the first issue we are going to pick up is going to be social. And issue number one is immigration will be a hot ticket issue around the world. Political factors. Number two, the issue number two will be US democracy faces a systemic challenge. Under the political rubric, issue number three will be the far right will become stronger in Europe. Under the economic rubric, issue number four will be increasing strains leading towards global recession. Issue number five under the economic rubric is global race for critical minerals. Now, there are two issues which combine social, political, economic, and religious. Issue number six, Europe faces a mega poly crisis. Issue number seven, instability on the rise, failing, flailing, and fracturing states. Now, finally, the military rubric, issue number eight, Russia-Ukraine war comes to an end. And issue number nine, last but not the least, tensions turning dangerous in East Asia. So we are now going to...
I'm sorry, Atul, to jump in, but although we have an overambitious agenda per usual already, I would add a 10th one, or at least another element under the military, and that is Israel, Gaza, Israel, the Middle East, Iran, and changing factors in the Middle East.
And the Middle East never ceases to surprise, does it? All right. So issue number one, immigration will be a hot ticket issue around the world. This is under the social rubric. And immigration is an issue that has taken center stage. US President Donald Trump won in part because he promised to secure America's borders. The British voted for Brexit to take back control, especially of the UK's borders. In France and Germany, immigration is now a central issue. Now, before you start thinking what's happening with all these Western countries, the third world countries are also concerned about immigration. Pakistan is packing off millions of Afghans to Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. Note that Germany and France are doing it. Note that the UK and even the US are not doing it. India is worried about Bangladeshis flooding in and changing the demography of parts of the country. Operation Dudula, a vigilante movement in Soweto, South Africa, is hunting down illegal immigrants, especially children who are going to schools funded by South African taxpayers. So the issue is global, but the issue is especially relevant to the West because people from what Donald Trump calls shithole countries want to move to more posh parts of the world. And indeed, in rich countries, women are not having babies. So you do need some cheap labor, ideally some skilled labor as well. Anyway, let's get to some numbers. The US, as of January 2025, 53.3 million immigrants, the largest number ever recorded, live in the US, live in the US, forming 15.4% of the population. So 53.3 million immigrants, 15.4% of the population. In the UK,
if I could just jump in for a second on that, what contributes to making The American circumstance is distinctive, unusual, since we all imagine, rightly, America as a nation of immigrants, is that immigration in the United States, although it had similar percentages of foreign-born to native-born residents 125 years ago, roughly speaking, immigration essentially stopped with World War I until 1965, after which and since which it has exploded. And so America is re-experiencing what it had not for two generations. And 4 generations ago, when we last had this level of population, we had a surge of nativist, racist, white supremacist political parties and social movements. And what are we experiencing now?
So, UK. At the time of the 2021-2022 census, the UK had 10.7 million immigrants, about 16% of the population. Both the numbers and the percentage have gone up since. In France, conservative estimates put the range from 10.3 to 13.8% of the population. In Germany, in 2024, there were 17.4 million immigrants, representing 20.9% of the population. This country is the largest destination for immigrants in the EU. And I'll repeat, 20.9, that is more than 1 out of 5. In the Netherlands, as of January 1, 2025, as per their website, their census website, there are more than 3 million immigrants out of a total of 18 million people, 16.8% of the population. So, what do we have? Europe has aging populations and falling birth rates, declining demographics. Therefore, on the one hand, it needs immigrants. However, immigration is causing challenges with assimilation. The factor of Islam in a Western secular society, where in some people's words, the 7th century confronts the 21st century, causes other problems. On the one hand, some people say Islamism is a problem, and those include people in intelligence agencies. And then there are others, the liberals, who believe Islamophobia is a problem. So Islamism and Islamophobia versus Islamophobia is defining the narrative wars in Europe. In a nutshell, immigration is a divisive issue worldwide. Over to you, Glenn.
Sure. Just for a moment, this an issue that I was going to say America has struggled with, but that's not really the case. The way America has addressed the issue of nationhood, of what American civilization is, what the culture is, what the country means, what it means to be someone within the United States, is that one holds allegiance to an ideal, a series of ideals. Europeans and non-Americans in general tend to marvel at how ubiquitous the American flag is everywhere, and you think, well, what is all that about? And what it really represents is the idea of America, and that is a largely liberal in the small, in the philosophical sense, political sense, subscription to democracy, individual rights, secular humanism, which I will affirm with tremendous pride. And fundamentally what that means is that the public space has to accept, tolerate fundamentally divergent views. So truth becomes personal and relative to a certain extent. That's the whole point. Now, that is being challenged when you have large numbers of immigrants who, for whatever reasons, seem not to, or explicitly do not, subscribe to the ideals. And then there becomes pressure for a blood and soil kind of definition of citizenship, of nationhood, which is you are where you were born or who you are ethnically and religiously. And that is the model that historically has obtained in most countries at most times, but actually is not compatible to the point where it is renders impossible a pluralist democracy to function. And that's fundamentally the issue, even though the average person doesn't articulate that or is even aware of that. That's what's underpinning or underlays this increasing roiling strife and crises in all of the democracies. So what's the consequence in the forecast we can try to make for all of this pressure of immigration and social change and strain? I think with some confidence we can say that the parties of the far right will continue to thrive. They are a reaction against these pressures and these changes and the challenges to what it is to be a citizen in one country or another. And that the democratic processes of the countries experiencing these changes, and that's most, will continue to fray. And social unrest, tensions, resentments will remain a growing driver in the political processes of progressively troubled democracies.
Indeed. And as we said, once you get a large number of people who believe in truth with a capital T, and remember, a lot of the religious wars in Europe were over the question of religion. It's easy to forget that now, but what the torch that Martin Luther lit in 1517 only subsided in 1648 with the Treaty of Westphalia and the modern nation state project. And when you get immigrants from a society where they believe that the Quran, which does not have the separation of church and state, where all Muslims are the Ummah, when they come to a largely secular society post 1648, post World War II, trying to create a liberal order with truth with a small t, and that clashes with truth with a capital T. And once economic turmoil hits, then you get the rise of the far right. And in a way, both Islamism and Islamophobia are going to remain in Europe. In a way, the US has it better because in US, you do not have the same degree of historical animus that immigrants sometimes bring to Europe, the former colonies coming to, as in France, the colonial masters. So immigration...
Well, I think Atul, I'll take a little issue with that, or give a different coloration to the point, because that leads to something I wanted to add before we move on to the next subject, and I don't want to take too much time. But Americans have forgotten, misunderstood, papered over, and interpreted in a rather Pollyanna-ish way today American history. And whereas one thinks, well, the religious wars were the European crisis, or they are the crisis of the West and Islam, or Christianity-based originated societies in Islam. That's true, but it misses one of the deep truths shaping American history, political and social, and that is the religious clash in the American context between Protestant and Catholic. That determined American history from the time of the Mayflower until certainly independence, because there was the struggle between Protestant England and Catholic France and Spain for domination of the continent. And then since then, Americans have tended to forget, because if we say, it's a separation of church and state, and the religious issues aren't the problem. No nativist American of English or Protestant origin disliked the Irish immigrants because they were Irish. The issue was that they were largely Catholic, and the original settlers who dominated were English, Scottish, Protestant. That shaped American politics decisively, arguably up to the present day, but certainly until about 1960, when John F. Kennedy crossed a lot of thresholds and changed many things. So this religion and its effects on society, and therefore its effects on the viability and successfulness of democracy, is the driving underlying force.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.